right, thanks everyone for joining us again. Today we have Sebastian Jimenez. He is the founder and CEO of Rillavoice. Sebastian graduated from NYU in 2018. He got funding from NYU Entrepreneurial Institute and launched his first startup, which was a field marketing management software for companies doing face-to-face marketing at events, music festivals, college campuses, and stores. With this company, he realized that field brand ambassadors were having millions of insight-rich, in-person conversations with end consumers every month, and there was no good way to capture the data. That's when he reached out to his high school friend, Michael. I had a chance to speak with Michael, very sharp guy. Michael is a signal processing expert, and together they launched Rilla, which is a speech analytics AI software to capture insights from all of the face-to-face conversations happening in offline commerce. Thanks for joining us today, Sebastian.
Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
All right, awesome. So very interesting to me, since I sit here in Latin America, specifically Medellin. But you were born and raised in Dominican Republic. When you were young, I mean, was there a focus on computer science? Let me back up. Is that where your interest started, or did it start when you came stateside?
Yeah, no, there was no focus on technology when I was growing up at all. When I came to America, I came to college wanting to study politics, philosophy, and economics. So I thought I wanted to go to law school, maybe do like a PhD in philosophy. I was just very interested in reading books and stuff like that. There was never an interest in technology. My interest in technology actually came because, so in NYU, what's very fun about NYU is just you're basically living, like you're basically a bachelor living in New York City as a 18-year-old, because they don't have a campus, so you're just there thrown in the city. Yeah. And I'd always liked, public speaking. I started doing stand-up comedy. Right? And I started doing stand-up at NYU. And at the same time, I was learning about data science and classes and stuff like that. But I started doing stand-up, and that's where I found my passion for building things out of nothing. And I was doing stand-up very, very intensely. I was doing like 6 shows a day, 7 days a week, like on the weekdays. Like imagine the kind of people who go to a stand-up show at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, right? I was doing that, right? I was doing that. And then I had this internship with this Forbes author who was interviewing a lot of tech founders. And we interviewed the founders of Etsy and a bunch of founders from New York City. And when we talked to them, what they were doing with technology seemed to me very similar to what I was doing in stand-up. The grit that you have to put yourself out there, the hustle, the marketing, the sales. And then most importantly, the idea that anytime you have a hypothesis about the world, you have to go out and test it out with users. Like you do in stand-up with a joke that you have to test it with an audience. And so very quickly, my passion for, creating jokes out of nowhere and doing the marketing and the sales to put myself out there, that very quickly translated into building products. And at the same time, I was doing, data science in college. And so that's where the passion for technology came from. It came from stand-up, literally.
Very interesting. And look, I'll tell you what, you don't see many people with that story, specifically leveraging stand-up to move into data science or AI, right? You were able to secure some funding to launch your first company, and now Rillavoice was a part of ERA. Yes. Can you tell us a bit about that process? What is ERA, and how did you all get involved, and what were you able to pull from that experience?
Yeah. So the first startup we launched was right out of college. We were one of the few startups funded by the NYU Entrepreneurial Institute. They fund like 10 every day, and then it's like this very intense application process. And they just gave you a little bit of cash. It was only like $10,000 from NYU, but they took no equity. And I remember, because I had a job offer lined up at this really cool company called Qualtrics in Utah, and they were like right before they got acquired for $8 billion, which would have been a really good deal for me. But I had a job lined up, and I remember telling my very Hispanic mother that I was going to not take the job because I was going to try to use this 10K NYU gave me to try to make something.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh, so you want to be unemployed? Like, what do you think you are, kid? Like, yeah. Like, are you out of your goddamn mind?" And so I did that. I launched that first company. It was literally, I was like splitting $800 rent with my girlfriend at the time, in what can only be described as a basement in Williamsburg. because I was trying to make the runway last because we were making no money at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because that was like 2018, and then in 2019, we finally started selling our field marketing management software. Started selling into, really cool companies, tech companies, distributors for Molson Heineken. And we started generating a lot of revenue very quickly, like 100K in ARR. And then that's where the idea for Rillavoice came around, because I was talking to these users. And I was working at the eLab. That's where I used to work, because we had no office, and that's the NYU Entrepreneurial Institute. And I remember Murat, the managing director of ERA, he came to visit. And one of the people at the eLab told me, like, hey, Murat from ERA is here. You should go pitch him the company. And I went in, just like, I didn't really know who he was. I had heard of ERA, but I'd never heard about Murat. I went and pitched him the company. And he was like, he asked me a couple questions. He's like, you should come pitch at ERA. And because they do these monthly events. I went to the event at ERA, and I did one of the best pitches I've ever done in my life. And he's like, I want you to come into ERA. He invited us to apply.
Yeah.
We applied, we got in. He was like one of our biggest champions in getting in. And for us, we decided to do ERA ultimately because, we were very young founders. All of my founders, Michael, I went to high school with him. We all graduated in 2018. And for us, it was very important to have that network because we had money that we had made from before. So it was very difficult for us to give up equity. Because that's one of the things you have to look at as a founder. Incubators, accelerator programs, they typically take like 7-8% equity for not a lot of cash. But for us, ultimately, what made us decide to do that was that we were very young, no network at all in terms of like professional network. And then we saw some of the teams that had gotten in, and these were much more experienced people than us who had previously built and sold companies for like $1 billion, people who were product designers at Zola, people who had been at other successful startups. So we were like, we want to be here just to have a network of friends who are much more smarter and experienced and better than us. And we just want to be here and learn from them. And that's what ultimately led us to do ERA. And it was probably one of the best decisions we've made so far, because not only did we have a network of founders and mentors and friends, also the introductions that we had to investors, and also the introductions that we had to potential clients, for like literally companies that did ERA previously, opening up their own stores. And that we were going to be using to test our technology. So for us, it was basically the value of the network.
Okay. And very interesting that you all were able to roll in saying, hey, look, we've built software before that has actually sold, right? We have revenue, although if I'm not mistaken, these are two different businesses, right?
These are two different businesses completely. Yeah.
So there's there's some track, right? Because some companies they never reach the point where they have revenue, right? So there's some track record of success that you were able to display where Murat, could say, hey, look, come pitch to ER. So I think that's awesome. I'd also give you props on, coming over from the DR, right? You don't have anyone who's encouraging you to be an entrepreneur, especially in tech. Then you have to leave a compelling offer at an established company where, hey, you might be the savior of the family, right? By taking that job, but you got that bigger vision. It's like, hey, look, I can accomplish X if I just, go out and start something on my own. So major props on that. What I do want to talk about is Rillavoice, right?
Yeah.
A little, the idea for starting the previous software company stemmed from your insight into the data, this issue with data that, was not being captured. Now, a lot of times, and for a lot of companies, whether they're enterprise, whether they're startups, right, there's data that, that it exists. Maybe it's being captured and maybe it's not. But for you, where did you have the insight to say, here's data that we can apply AI to that would ultimately create value to someone who'd be willing to pay for whatever that value is?
Yeah, perfect. So when we were doing the first company, we were selling these field marketing management software solutions. And if people don't know what field marketing is, if you think of the Red Bull kids who wear the uniforms, they go to college campuses, they interact with people face to face, they hand out Red Bull at streets and music festivals. That's what field marketing is. It's face to face marketing. And our solution was very, very simple, right? It was literally a form builder that people could collect data on a form. The brand ambassadors would collect some event feedback. They would collect some sort of data that they would pass on to the cloud so that the field marketing managers and the executives could see like how did the event go, how many people did we talk with, what was the gender, what was the general comments, right? And talking to these executives at Heineken and Molson, some of the people that we were in touch with for this product, we realized that they were spending a lot of money on consumer insights research. They were spending tens of millions of dollars on consumer insights panels, on online surveys, on social media analytics, and they weren't getting a lot of data in return. And especially for these companies who sold and distributed their products offline, it was very hard to get directly to their customer because they have to sell to distributors and to retailers, and then finally the retailers sell to the customers. But it was very hard for them to get direct, access to their actual feedback from customers. And so we saw that they were like paying $100,000 for like a panel with 500 interviews, right? So a lot of money for very little data. It took a lot of time to capture it. It took like 3 months to complete an online survey, right? And then we didn't think the data was really good because you were paying people to take a survey, and so there was some bias there, right? You don't even know if they're. And then we noticed that these kids, they're brand ambassadors. I literally went myself to these events as a brand ambassador just because I wanted to know what the conversations were like. They were talking to millions and millions of people every single month, face to face. And it was about the actual product, about the actual brand. And people would communicate their brand awareness. Have they heard of the brand and where from? Do they consume the brand? How often? Their brand loyalty. They were talking about what they like, what they don't like about the product. And we were like, these are the only people in the entire supply chain of the company who are getting the direct feedback from the actual customers in real environment. And that's when I was like, that's when I called Michael and I was like, Michael, I told him the exact same thing I told you. I was like, this data is there. It's not being captured at all. We could bake this data. They could have 1,000 times more data, 100 times faster for a fraction of the cost that they're paying for these surveys and all these panels and stuff. Is it possible? Can we do this? And Michael was like, well, you have to do a lot of fancy things with separating the speakers. You have to deal with the noise. You have to deal with, people sounding far away from the microphone. But I mean, you could do it. I'm like, what do you mean you, homie? Like, you mean we? Get your ass out of your job and we're going to go home and launch this thing. And like, that's why we called it Rilla, because initially it was a solution for guerrilla marketing, for field marketing, right? That's why we called it Rilla.
Okay.
And then very quickly we realized it's not only field marketing, it's any conversation that's happening face to face. In the world. It includes retail associates, bank tellers, car dealers, flight attendants, grocery clerks. Any time an employee of a company is talking to a customer face to face, and we very quickly knew, like, okay, whatever success we had with this previous company we think this was just the way for us to get started, for us to get to the truth, which is here, and this is what we're going to do. So we're going to stop selling this other product. We're going to put all hands on deck with Rillavoice, and that's when we got started.
Yeah, very interesting. And so, are you delivering insights to the customer? And if insights is kind of the insights you're delivering, if that's the key value prop, what kind of insights? What are the things that the customers are learning and being able to act upon?
So yeah, there's two kinds of data that you can capture as a data analytics company. And we like to divide it as the data that you can get generalized insights to help you make better decisions in the long term for your business. And then data that helps you make your operations on the day-to-day better. And right now, and the data that's for your operations, that's the data that you see the immediate value proposition. And that's the one that we like to focus on with our customers. So for instance, in a retail environment where a lot of our early clients and pilots have been, you think of imagine a retail sales associate there, you talk to them in a store, they're wearing the microphone, or AI is listening in the background, almost like Alexa, and it's capturing a bunch of these analytics. I'll give you like 2 examples of how the data not only helps you make better decisions, but it literally makes your processes better. And it actually helps you reduce costs and increase revenue and so on. So one is inventory planning. You go into a store, you ask, hey, do you guys have these, soccer shoes here? Store says, oh, no, we just ran out, or we don't carry it anymore here. We don't have it. That's what's called an out of stock, or not carrying the product in assortment. And what happens now is that in order to forecast their inventory, retailers are relying on previous purchase data. What you just look at what happened, what people purchased in the past, and then you try to estimate what they're going to purchase in the future based on what they're purchasing. What's the problem with that? Problem is that it's only 20% of people who walk into stores who actually buy something. So you're missing 80% of the data. And now with Rilla, what you can do is actually capture the signals of what products people are looking for, not only what they're purchasing, what they're looking for. But you literally integrate this into your inventory forecast to make it 10 times more accurate. You can estimate demand with the actual demand of your customers, with 100% of it, not only the purchase data. And so that's something that's like, there's nobody having to make a decision here. It's just integrated into the data pipeline. You're forecasting inventory more accurately, so you're actually going to see how your sales increase because you're not missing out on so many sales. Another example, very quick example, is sales associate training, right? And coaching, and for quality purposes. Right now, the way training is done, you have a manager who has all these previous experiences and intuitions about how you should talk to customers. They develop a training manual, and then the only feedback that's given to store associates is anytime somebody messes up and the customer complains, and you go and you give the store associate a lambast, and you're like, you should have done better. It's like this very negative feedback.
Yeah.
With Rilla, you actually get to coach people based on actual data, not just intuitions. It's not negative feedback. You can also get positive feedback when people are really, their customer sentiment analysis show that they're treating customers so well that customers love them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the onboarding time for getting new sales associates or store associates in up to speed with the metrics and with the training processes. You see that it gets reduced from weeks into days. So you see how that actually improves your. You have to spend less time on coaching and training. Your training and coaching is better because it's based on actual data. And there's many examples like this of how we're not only like helping you make better decisions, but actually making your operations on the day-to-day better, increasing your revenue or reducing your costs. And that's really, as a data analytics company, that's really where you want to be, because that's an easier way to show value to your customers instead of saying to them, hey, you know, over time you're going to be able to see, which is also important. But what's going to make the sale is telling them, here's how I'm helping you today reduce your costs, increase your productivity, and increase your revenue.
Yeah, yeah. And I can imagine in the example where you need to understand inventory planning. If you got tons of customers that are coming in asking for a specific product, but it's never on the shelf, maybe because you don't know that's what they want, or maybe you're just, you know, consistently out of stock. But you can plan for that. You can plan to have that on the shelf. And in that way, it's actually, you know, it's increasing revenue for the company, which I can imagine is going to be pretty exciting for folks who may not be, you know, I could see a use case for Walmart, but for folks who may not be as intelligent or have as much capital to throw at that issue as one of, you know, the top companies in the world. Right.
And it's like, if you look at that particular problem, it's like a $300 billion problem in retail because of all the sales that are missed because of this inventory planning problem. So it's a very simple solution to a very, very large problem, which is great.
Okay. So I'm curious how the customer actually engages with Rillavoice, right? Are you providing some sort of dashboard to management? Is there something that, you know, maybe a floor, you know, employee that's on the floor needs to wear? What's the engagement like with the technology?
So the way it works is very simple. We are hardware agnostic, so we don't do any of the hardware. We do send you microphones as a retailer. So you sign up with us. You say, hey, here's how many stores I have. Here's all my store associates. We set you up with an account. You put all your addresses. We ship you a bunch of microphones. And the microphones we ship, you could literally use your phone as a microphone. But the reason we don't do that is because, you know, people put their phone in the pocket and then you can't hear anything. So we send you these microphones that you can clip onto your store associates. Super cheap. Costs like $30 each. And if you order in bulk, it's even cheaper. So then you put on these microphones, they connect into the phone. We've seen retailers use the personal phones of the store associates or their own devices that they have in the store. And the reason they can use their personal phones is that it never takes any data. It only uploads data when it's connected to Wi-Fi. And it's very secure. There's all these safety mechanisms to make sure that the data is secure. And so they connect the microphone to their phone. They put it on. They talk to customers like normal. Then the AI is there listening in the background. There's a bunch of analysis that's done in the cloud. And then at the end product looks like three things. One, the store associate gets their own metrics in their app. They can be analyzing what's working, what's not working. What are the greetings that you should be using to greet customers to increase your conversion rates? What are the top objections that you should be expecting for this product based on the history of the data? What are the top questions that customers are asking so you can prepare yourself better? So that's for the store associate, which we've seen is like the biggest stakeholder in here. They're the person that takes value immediately from the tool because they can be analyzing their own metrics. And then for the retailer managers and the executives, they add the smart, searchable, filterable transcripts of the conversation. completely anonymized for both the shoppers and the store associates. The store associates, they can opt in or opt out of sharing their data with their managers. So if
Okay,
they opt out, the managers will see the conversation, but they won't know who's who. They'll
got it.
just see like an anonymized transcript, which we think is good to help the employees be empowered in their own data and their privacy. And so you get a bunch of anonymized GDPR compliant, CCPA compliant transcripts that you can search and filter to do qualitative analysis. And then you also get the dashboards that just give you the numbers so you can quickly sift through your customer experience metrics,
Mhm.
your marketing performance metrics, your inventory planning metrics. Like you see the out of stocks and you see like here's all the number of out of stocks that happened for this product or this brand. And so you get the transcripts and the analytics dashboards,
Okay.
and also the mobile app where the store associates can check their own metrics.
So is the solution, is it something where you are able to deliver out of box, or do you kind of have to work with customer data before you can then begin to deliver some of these customized insights?
So that's one of the things I think this would be helpful for a lot of AI companies, because that's one of the things that's one of the big challenges in AI. Like
Mhm.
launching a software company, or just like a mobile app, is very easy because you just launch and you start providing value immediately. Software
Right.
with AI, right? Like it's not just software. It's like there's like there's random noise there, right? Because you're predicting, right? You're not.
Yeah.
It's not as set in stone as software. So so one of the things we try to do is to give value to the customer right off the bat. And the way we do that is with unsupervised models. So there are parts of the data that you can, or parts of our models that you can, that are off the shelf that they'll start working immediately. Like the transcripts you'll get immediately. There's this unsupervised algorithm that we have for summarization of conversations and topic segmentation. So we'll tell you like all these topics showed up in these conversations and the keyword analysis and all that. And then there's some metrics that we've already trained for, like determining what's the engagement level of a customer, their customer sentiment analysis. But usually, especially if it's a large retailer, there's some period of fine tuning. It's typically like a couple of weeks to a month where we're just capturing data. We sit down with them to see what are the metrics that they want to capture, because certain retailers want to capture certain things. Some retailers want to capture like what was the percentage of time that my store associates recommended the loyalty card at checkout. What was the percentage of times that customers came into the store asking for a remodeling of their house, right?
Hmm.
And so those things you want to train in a supervised way by labeling data. And it takes a little bit of time to label like a couple thousand of examples so that then the metric is very accurate. And that usually takes like about a month. And then, but the data starts running thereafter. So in the meantime that we do that setup with the supervised labels, we're already giving value with the unsupervised and the off the shelf ones. So it's both.
Yeah, yeah. And I find that that's always an interesting conversation, right? Because most people are used to
Yeah.
plug and play, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
software, we're going to plug it in and it starts working. And
Right.
it's kind
Right.
of
Right.
like for you, right? You have to kind of play in the middle of that, right? We're going to give you something that you'll be able to use from day one. But the
Right.
power in
Right.
AI in this particular example is that personalization, right? Or in the
Right.
case, I
Right.
don't, companyization is not really a word, but let's go with it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Being able to customize some of those recommendations, some of those analytics to your customer, that part is going to take a little bit of time. And generally what we hear is it takes some time to train the customer to understand that. You have to kind of set expectations
Right.
that,
Right.
look,
Yeah.
yes, this is
Yeah.
it's not going to work out of the box. You know, it's going to take us some time working
Yeah.
together to really fine tune some of those insights, some of those recommendations and
Yeah.
predictions that you're going to want, that are going to deliver the true power that, you know, you
Right.
see in this AI solution.
Right. And if you're working with large clients who are sort of used to, having like a proof of concept period that's like a month, 3 month time, they're totally fine. As long as you're good at setting the expectations of like, hey, here's what the timeline's going to look like. At first you'll get these metrics that are off the shelf, but then in a month you'll start seeing the true power of it. And then as long as you're delivering on that, it's totally fine. But you just have to set the expectations from the beginning. And the other thing I wanted to add to that is that as you start training more and more of these supervised labels with more clients, your stack of off-the-shelf analytics is going to be improving, right? So the more you train with new clients and more new metrics you train, the more you're going to be able to add new value to new customers by saying like, hey, we already have these off the shelf, right?
Yeah.
If you want to train anything new, we'll just put it in the stack and it'll be there for new clients. So it's like this really nice way of scaling it as well. But it does require that initial training period. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is very interesting with what you all are doing is just kind of really looking at customers across the globe, right? And we
Yeah,
spoke about this earlier in terms of you having the capability to work with customers in LATAM, right? Why is that different? Because now you're ingesting data that's not in English, right? And
right,
so,
right, right.
so the ability to be able to do that, deliver insights in multiple language is very
Yeah.
interesting. Why I bring that up is because I want to talk about your experience as a startup delivering a solution to a global customer base. What is it like having those conversations with customers globally versus purely selling into a US market?
So the first thing that it's like is that your sleep schedule is going to be messed up because you're like talking to like Japan and like just getting up and it's like 1 a.m. in the morning and you're like, okay, let's get this done, son. Let's do this, man. And so that's one your schedule, but yeah, there are nuances in selling in different markets. And for us, it's been really helpful anytime we're talking to customers in a new market. So we've been talking to customers, like you mentioned, in Latin America and Mexico and other countries in Latin America. We've been talking to customers in Japan and Malaysia, in China, in Hong Kong, and we've been setting up in all these different languages. And that's just making sure that the technology works. We are lucky that our technology does, a lot of our technology is language agnostic, like all of our proprietary signal processing to deal with the audio and the people's voices, that's all language agnostic, and speech to text, at least with Google and Amazon, it does work in many of the languages in the world. So then the natural language processing is the only part that you have to sort of set up in new languages. And for us, it looks the same way that it looks like anytime we set up with a new client. It's just like there's a period of fine tuning and we're going to fine tune these metrics for the new language, right? And so in terms of the technology, there's a way to set it up. But also in terms of the sales process, for instance, customers in Japan, they're much slower than customers in America. So I had a funny thing where like, I would be following up with them every 3 days and be like, hey, we had the call, like, what are we gonna do? And they'd be like, oh, okay, let's talk in like 3 weeks. And I was like, oh, okay, that's weird.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then somebody, like one of our advisors told us, like, oh, no. That's just how business is conducted there. So it's been an interesting learning process in talking to all these different people. And yeah, so you do have to be aware of like first the technical challenges of your product of implementing it in new markets, and then also like the different sales process. And for us, we're at a stage where we're just trying to see our startup is like getting interest from a lot of different verticals, and we're like, okay, we're finding all this interest. At some point we're going to be like, we're going to focus on this market, we're going to focus on
Mhm.
this because that's where we saw the biggest value proposition. But right now, getting all this interest is showing us like, okay, from around the world there's all these different metrics that people care about, there's all these different ways of doing the business. So that's where we are right now. But yes, as a general rule of thumb, you should always try to focus the beginning, try to get as much interest as you can, but then try to focus in on one particular area.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So generally, when you're having these conversations, is AI a big part of the conversation, right? Or is it that they're mainly focused on the value you're providing? Do you have to educate the client that you are using AI and how?
So one of the very cool things that happened to us. So when the shutdown happened in the United States, all of our clients, prospects, customers, pilot partners, they had to shut down their stores. We launched in New York City, right? That was the heart of it. And then the fundamental assumption of our business is that people like going outside and talking face to face.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that wasn't happening. We were like, I was calling my mom. I was like, Mom, you were right, man. I had to take that job. Like, it's over, man. Like, we're going back home. And so there was like a period of like, what's going to happen? Nobody knew what was going to happen. And then all of this international traction that we started getting, it started happening quite surprisingly. Like right in the middle of the summer, we started getting all this inbound from China, from Japan, from Mexico, from all these different countries. And all of these guys were already trying to use AI. Like they looked for me. I wasn't trying to sell them the value position of AI. They were already trying to do this. And that was what was very powerful for us, because I asked 2 or 3 of these, I asked them, where did you hear about us, right? Because I wasn't doing any marketing or advertising internationally, certainly not in Japan or Malaysia or China. And I was like, where did you hear about me? 3 of these companies, very large companies from around the world, they told me, we came to you because of a direct recommendation from a competitor.
Mm.
And I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, we were trying to use this provider who does our speech analytics for our call centers, right? For calls with your service reps. And we wanted to use their technology for our store associates in our stores. But they told us they cannot service this use case for face-to-face conversations. And they felt really bad. And so they wanted to be helpful. They looked you guys up online. You were the only thing that showed up. And they sent us to you. And that was like, to us, it was like, we have the power of God with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like, wow, like this hypothesis that we had about that there's a big market for this in the world and that the state of the art technology is not really there to capture it. It was like, it was given. So it was like, yes, the market was telling us we need this. We're already wanting to do this. We understand the value proposition. We just need somebody to do this for us. So we were quite lucky in that regard. And we're not trying to sell the value proposition of AI or speech analytics for that matter.
Yeah.
It's just for us, it's like, we're the ones who can do it.
Okay.
And it was like, so it was very lucky. And we're very grateful that it happened that way because it literally came to us.
Okay.
And it was at a time where we were like, we don't know really what's going to happen in the long term with the company because everything, it was in this weird time. And then we had this very massive, unexpected traction inbound. So
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's very, very lucky. but hey, sometimes look, you'll take it how it comes.
Yeah.
But what I think is interesting is that you guys are pretty smart in leveraging, right? You mentioned relationships earlier,
Right.
and how, working with ERA, they opened up a lot of relationships that you would eventually be able to leverage. But then you got some recommendations because you are able to do something that I won't say a competitor, but a complementary product to some of these larger organizations can't do. So
right.
Very interesting. Now, I kind of want to go back to the technology. As you think about the data strategy, training algorithms, or even, hiring, the first few folks that are very technical on the team on the AI side.
Yeah.
Any specific challenges that you can think of and learning lessons that you've had since then?
So, yes. So the biggest challenge for me at the beginning when I had this idea was to get the right team to do it. And I was also lucky in this regard that my friends from high school were these top-notch people.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now the team is it's 4 or 5 people and one of them is remote. And but like the founding team, everybody's technical.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we have Michael, who's like the signal processing he's the one who's building all of our proprietary technology. We have Lucas, who was my CTO in the previous company, who studied master's in computer science in Imperial College London. And we have Chris, who's also my friend from high school, who did computer science at University of Pennsylvania. So these really smart guys who are very, very technical. And I literally when I had this idea, it took me like 6 months to convince all these amazing people to quit their jobs and join me in this insanity, right? Like this. And that was like the first challenge. But once you get a really good core founding team with that, it's so much easier to scale from there. I already see it. The first few people that we're like recruiting and because we're in the process of fundraising and looking for people that we're going to be hiring early 2021, it's all going to come from our networks and from the friends and friends of friends that Chris and Michael and Lucas have from college, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we didn't have that, it would have been, I think, much more challenging to find these really top, because when you're doing, especially in AI companies, especially in a company like ours where we're literally pushing the boundary of AI, like the things that we're doing with signal processing, it's not like Michael can go on Stack Overflow and be like, hey, how do you make this new model that didn't exist before, right? Especially when you're pushing the boundary, you do really need really smart people and people that are at the forefront of research. It's really hard to recruit them, especially if you don't. I don't know how I would do it if I didn't have these guys with me, right? So that's how we're approaching that challenge. But it is a challenge. And the way we're approaching it is the way I solved it was I just need to make sure that I have an amazing founding team.
Yeah. But so for your founding team though, what was it? I mean, because eventually you had to, like you said, you had to convince them to leave their job, right? So what was it that you said or you were able to do to convince these really talented folks to let go of the safety of the paycheck and join you on the journey?
I said many things.
whatever's necessary.
I had to say everything, man. I had to quote the Bible.
There you go.
And no, because like if you think about it, like Michael, for instance, Michael's a single parent household, right?
Grew up in a single parent household.
He grew up in a single parent household. His mom raised him and his twin brother. He had a really good job. He was working for a DoD contractor at the time, it was the first time he was making really good money, right? And that's the thing with these amazing people, that they're always their opportunity cost is high, right? Because they're doing amazing things, because they're amazing. And Michael came, like, he studied electrical engineering in UM. He like was published in the IEEE as an undergrad for his work on detecting autism early on in children from the sound of their voice. So he was really, and what he was doing for the DoD contractor was really powerful things with signal processing. And so how do you tell a guy like that, who's like basically living the American dream,
right?
who got to a point where like, okay, now I have a stable income, I made it. How do you tell us, like, let's risk it all for something, something crazy that's very risky? And the first thing is that the vision was there.
Mm-hmm.
He saw it. If he didn't see the vision, he wouldn't have done it. And the first person that I called, like when I called him to tell them the same things I told you about the data that we found out, he literally started laughing. He's like, "Oh my God, oh my God, there's so much." Like, he saw it, right? And so my job as a CEO, first and foremost, it was just like to communicate the vision very clearly, make sure that everybody believed in, right?
Okay.
And so, and thereon, it was like, now that they saw a vision, it was like, dude, we can do this, and nobody's doing this. Is like, we can do this. Like, the vision's there. Then it was a matter of basically telling them, hey, it's gonna be okay. I know this is scary, but we're young. You know what I mean? If we fail, and that's gonna be it. But we're gonna have learned so much more than if we were doing anything else.
Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
And then at the end, there was a moment where Michael was literally like, and Chris too, right? Like, Lucas had been with me from before, so I had already committed from before. Like, Chris and Michael, they had this moment of like, oh my God, I'm about to do this shit. I'm about to quit my job, and it was this very. I remember doing this mistake of telling them like, oh, but now we have like, because I already had a little bit of traction with the previous clients, and I'm like, listen, it's not as risky as you think it is. And I was like doing the numbers, and I'm like, and that was not the right way to go about it. It turned into this very personal conversation of, what do you want to do with your life? I feel like you are the type of person that should do this, and then them convincing themselves like, yeah, I think this is what I should be doing with my life and my purpose, and this is the best thing to be doing with my time right now. And he had a heart-to-heart with his mom, and his mom was super supportive. She's like, you know what? If you believe in it and you think you're the right guy, like, just go for it. And that was also helpful for me when I decided, because I talked to my dad, right? And my dad was like, yeah, you know what I mean? You came to America to do something great. You know what I mean? So this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what's so interesting about what you're saying here is I had a lot of conversations with founders kind of in a similar situation. And a lot of the conversation is around, you got to hire the right personalities, because it takes a certain type of personality to join a startup. And so then, just starting a company is hard in general, right? But then you think about building a company that is creating, cutting edge technology. It adds a bit of a higher hurdle, right? So hiring the right personalities from the beginning is very important. And in fact, in terms of just the challenge of hiring, and you and I have spoken about this before, but like, that was one of, the motivations for starting Tesoro AI, right? Is look, there's this gap. Right. And a lot of software companies that want to implement AI, is kind of like, well, how do we get that next person in so that we can continue building this software, right? So the ability to provide that, to fill that gap is always important, right? But obviously, to the point you made, those first few people that you bring in are critical. I also want to talk a little bit about data, because you guys are taking in a ton of data, right? So, and at some point you probably had to weigh the decision, right? When you're thinking about labeled data, do it internally, do it externally. How did you, I guess, what were the positives and negatives, and how did you weigh those as a company?
So yeah, that's a very, very, very good question. So that's literally one of the first things that we started thinking about. Very quickly, we realized that the best scalable solution for us was to partner with people that had already done the hiring and the outsourcing and the management of the labor, especially when we're talking about these international clients. But at the same time, it was important for us to keep the data integrity and the data security and the privacy in our clients' interests and
Mm-hmm.
in their customers' interests, so that there was very little opportunities for security breaches and so on and so forth. So what we decided was to have to partner with people that would outsource the hiring of the contractors of the labelers, but that they would be operating within our own platform. That they would be doing the labeling in our own in-house built software, and so that's what we decided to do in terms of data security. And there are some solutions out there that are really, really amazing in terms of like labeling, and that's something we might explore in the future. But
Mm-hmm.
right now, we decided that it was best to keep everything in house, so that we know that the data is secure and so on and so forth. So yeah, so we literally just built a very simple platform for data labeling, which is actually great because our customers can actually design their own data labeling exercises.
Oh, nice.
Because they say like, hey, I want to capture this new analytic, and then they can get examples from their actual transcripts and be like, hey, they select them and they put them in as examples, and then we can use that as a labeling exercise that goes into
Mm-hmm.
the same platform where the labelers are just there labeling the data. And
Right.
so it was like a very good way for us to seamlessly integrate everything into our technology. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Which is interesting, right? Because it's kind of like a hybrid, right? Where you're doing it internally, but at the same time, you're not having, Michael's not out there labeling data, right?
no,
So,
and it's also Michael's not out there having to hire the people that are gonna doing the because there's a very good companies out there who have already, like, that's their business. They've set up a foundation of a workforce in different countries, especially for us that we're doing so many different languages. It would have been so difficult for us if we didn't have these partners.
yeah, fair.
So so it's worked out because of that, because
Okay.
it would have been just too time consuming for us to set up our entire workforce for all these different languages and then
Yeah.
hire them and manage them and knowing how to hire the right people. So it was easy for us to partner that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it's very interesting to hear your approach and why, right? Because for certain others, right, there are certain nuances in the
Yeah.
data where it's like, look, no, we need to do this entirely internally and
Right.
train people
Yeah.
specifically to do it. But what the decision is very unique to the organization versus they're saying, no, you should absolutely outsource that, or you should
Yeah.
absolutely do that internally. Last thing, and I know we're coming up on time here. You shared a
Mhm.
ton of great advice and learning lessons that you've had to get to the point where you are now. Anything else? Anything else that's stuck with you that if you could go back, to day one and advise yourself at day one, hey, you should probably do X, and you'll be a lot happier for it. What is that?
Um, so basically, you're asking me of a time I messed up terribly. What should I? Um, hmm. Let me think. I would. I would. I would absolutely. So two things I think would be really helpful here. As a young founder, I was debating whether it was good for us to do an incubator or not. If you're a young founder, absolutely. If it's one of the top incubators, you should actually, or accelerators, absolutely do it. Even though the equity does seem like a little bit too much. It's like, as a young founder, you are literally battling an uphill battle because you lack experience. So
Mm-hmm.
having an access to people that know more than you and that advice was so much better. And I eventually made the right decision, right? But at the beginning, I was very unsure, and then it
Debate.
was like, so yeah, I definitely do that. And then I, um, I think this is something. It wasn't a mistake, but this is something I didn't know when I started. I think when you're doing a startup, you're trying to, at least how I see it. There's different types of startups, and the one that I was doing before was the different type. There's startups that are trying to improve on something that's an already established thing, right? Like you're building a product that you know there's a market for already, but your product's going to be better in some way. It's going to have better design, right? There's many of these products, like in these very competitive markets, like CRM, right? If anybody builds a CRM today, that's already like a very established industry. You know what you need to do. And so there's, and what I was doing before with the previous company was certainly that. It was like a form builder that had all these capabilities, right? But then there's the other type of company where you're trying to do really something that's really pushing the edge, like the cutting edge of technology. And in both cases, there should be the same guiding principle, which is what is the problem that you're solving? Because great solutions always come from great problems that you're solving. And always, like, for us, it was an impetus to find something cutting edge that like that's what really got us excited, but it always came from the problem. Like the idea came from that big insight that we had with these big executives at these big companies, and we saw the pain of capturing customer data, right? And I would say I didn't know this all the time, that this was, you know, what you should be doing. I just followed my intuition very suspiciously. I was like, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
But what always grounds you in reality. You don't want to just do a startup because like, oh, AI is hot and it's all this cutting edge technology. It's going to be amazing, because then you're just, it's like a lot of things that happen with the blockchain companies. We're like, oh, we're going to do blockchain, and then we're like come up with these ridiculous applications that weren't really grounded in reality, right? So if you start from a problem, I think if you start from a problem and you find a cutting edge solution that can solve this problem 1,000 times better, wow, that's wow. But it always should be rooted in the problem.
No, very, very helpful. And I'll add a little bit to that is when you start with the problem, you may find that you don't even need AI to solve it.
Right.
Which can save you a lot of headache. But
right.
Listen, thanks for taking some time to chat today. This was super helpful. A lot of gems to take away from this conversation. And we got to have you again on to give us an update on how things are going.
Absolutely, man. Thank you and a wonderful show that you have. I've seen some of the other episodes, so keep doing this, man. This is pretty cool.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. It's we're going to be ramping up soon here, so keep an eye out for more.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.